Grady Gibbs, what do you do for a living?
We help doctors.
We.
Of
Who's
Yes,
we?
Evolve Medical Consulting, our company that I work for, and we have a team of people who support practices with, among other things, a patient education platform that helps the doctor deal with selling products and procedures. And
I didn't realize you weren't independent. You have an employer?
I'm fiercely independent. No.
Do you get a W-2 or are you a 1099?
W-2.
How many folks are involved? How big a company is it?
We have about 300 employees now.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So I'm not the boss or anything. I'm really just the guy who supplies the dad jokes. That's kind of my function in the company. But we provide all kinds of services and software to practices. And then one of our kind of key offerings is this educational platform where a doctor can tell a patient, hey, I'm going to have an email that invites you to log into the platform and watch a video or read a PowerPoint or be exposed to some other educational course material. Mm-hmm. And it's originally designed to help with adherence and compliance and just sort of patient education. But of course, what winds up happening is doctors use it to market as well.
Okay. And Ed Capabianca apparently will not be one-upped by your dad joke. My cousin told me this on the way to our Irish grandfather's funeral. What's the difference between an Irish wedding and an Irish wake? One less drunk. Very nice.
Edward, where does an Irishman go on vacation? A different bar.
That's funny. That's funny.
I heard that in Southie in South Boston one year that when the guy heard my first name was Grady, he thought that was my last name and thought I was like his long lost cousin from the old country, and shared his favorite Irish joke with me. I then asked for directions to where I was going, and he literally said, go down here about 4 blocks and you'll see the 3 Crowns. Take a right. Go like maybe half a mile and you'll see like the Crown.
Another bar landmark.
Literally no other landmarks, no street names, nothing. Just from one bar, take a turn, next bar, take a turn, and completely unironic. Absolutely no idea that he was, fulfilling that stereotype. So
at this point, as host, I feel if we really focus, we will talk about what you do for a living.
we help doctors sell, and believe it or not.
Do you have a roster of clients or are you business development?
I'm the strategic relationship side. So I spend most of my time working with the companies that we support. And then we have a client success team that supports the practices. And of course, salespeople who help get new practices on the team.
How many, I don't know, would you define it as how many practices you have as your clients?
It's now in the thousands of practices. And lots of PCPs, but every other specialty as well.
So if I were a practice and I were a client, I'm sure there are different levels of being a client, from as simple as can a consultant come out here and talk with me for a few hours to what is the soup to nuts shy of I'm talking with you every day on the phone? Is there like a newsletter and a portal and tips about how to make your practice more profitable?
We start with an analysis, especially around reimbursement issues. One of the things that we help identify is billing problems, billing issues. We don't do billing at all, but we do analyze the practice workflow. We look for audit flags, underbilling, misbilled opportunities, things that aren't being properly done. And in that mix, there's almost always an opportunity to increase additional services, provide other things for the patients. And one of the things that we try to teach or educate clients on who are doctors is to don't look at healthcare as something that's reimbursed based on a CPT code. That's one of the common misconceptions, that healthcare is only this set of things that we can bill an insurance company for. And if you get in the patient's head, what they view as healthcare is a much, much broader array of services and products that they want, that they view as a contributory to their health. And an example would just be things like a gym membership. People get a gym membership because they're working out for their health. And once doctors broaden that perspective and see the entirety of what is healthcare, they realize they've got that entree to offer lots of other products and services to their patients, as well as just doing a better job or an easier job for the doctor of educating the patient about what they do day to day.
What is Evolve's website?
EvolveMedicalConsulting.com.
Okay.
And we don't do much with the site. It's pretty basic, like contact us kind of thing. Most of our work starts with the doctors know they need help, especially financial, and we start with a deep dive on the numbers, and then we give them kind of a roadmap of everything that we recommend we go do, and then we just take that as I like to joke, you eat a pizza a slice at a time. And so the process is just to work through one slice at a time of those recommendations.
Well, this is interesting. A woman-owned consulting and support provider. It makes it sound very cottage. It doesn't sound like a 300-person operation. So you really, it looks here like I have two choices. I can either learn about the patient education platform or remote psychologic monitoring.
Physiologic.
Pardon me. Thank you.
That's okay.
And there's no menu. This is it.
Yep. We were one of the first players in the RPM business, and we're in that first tier in terms of size.
And is that how, wow, you really are serious about bare bones here. Is that how Brent found you?
Yes, and LinkedIn. Most companies that find us are finding me on LinkedIn, and we go through this company and a sister company that works as a distributorship as well.
Yes, you've been doing a fantastic job on LinkedIn, and let's just show the kind folks at home. And frankly, well, I mean, Grady, by the way, is on MDG Premium. You can find him there. He's a single channel member and came on to help me help Brent. But he's been making these videos, which is exactly what I recommend for folks. And it's just it looks so personable. I mean,
Shoeshine Man. His nickname was Sonny, but he was older than my father. So out of respect, I called him Lewis. Lewis was shining shoes. And of course, this is a shoe shine stand that you have to sit up on.
I'll let you tell the story in person.
No, this was a series of videos I did about things I learned from owning a shoe shine stand in my dry cleaners. When I was in college, I took a leave of absence and opened a small chain of shoe shine or dry cleaners and shoe repair shops in the tunnel system that connects all the office buildings in downtown Houston. And I had this shoe shine guy who shined shoes, and people would come in and get their shoes shined. And that, gave us an opportunity to talk to them about bringing us their dry cleaning or shoes for repair.
I learned from Lewis.
Go ahead.
So in those days, the typical barbershop or car wash or anything that had a shoe shine stand would charge the shine man about $60 a week in cash for rent on the stand. And what I did is I waived that and said, I don't want money. I just want the best shoe shine guy in Houston. I want you here every day, all the hours that we're open, and I just want you to do a great job. And that's what he did. And what wound up happening, Joe, is the president of the bank, the guy who was the CFO of the bank upstairs, the managing partner of the law firm that had like 4 floors of the building we were in. These guys stopped in to get shoe shines and then decided, yeah, this is an easy thing for me to just drop my dry cleaning on the way to the office and pick it up on the way home or on the way back to the parking garage. And what happened was all the younger people in the bank saw these big bosses bringing me their dry cleaning, and it just became a land office business. So I was making solid six-figure money in 1986 on a dry cleaners with shoe repair.
Wow.
And really it was about negotiating the win-win for Lewis,
That's amazing. We're pretty much the same age. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
55. I'll be 56 in June.
Okay, I'll be 56 in October. I sure as hell wasn't earning six figures in 1986.
Well, you didn't have Lewis.
I did not. Wow, that's fantastic. So here's a question. You have this great content on LinkedIn where, in my mind, you don't find physicians.
You'd be surprised. We're, of course, I'm not personally looking for physicians as much as the companies that want us to market their products and include their product or service in our offering to the clients.
Of course, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So.
And how long have you been with them?
4 years now.
So it's certainly a trend that started before 4 years ago, but how old is Evolve?
4 years. 4 years old. I was the first hire.
Oh, that's okay. Wow. All right. Have you seen any shift in business as fewer doctors have their own practices and they are hospital employees?
Yes, we do provide services to some of the IDNs, especially around the remote physiologic monitoring. But our clientele, our preferred clientele, are the independent doctors, and there's absolutely been. I don't think the trend towards employment has been all that significant in the last 4 years. I mean, it's just a continuation of what's been happening, and I'm a contrarian on that trend, which I'll tell you about in a second. But what's happened is, as it has settled in that most doctors work for someone else, the ones who are still independent are fiercely independent, and they're looking for ways to survive. They're looking for ways to improve patient care and generate revenue for the practice, which makes them much more amenable to talking to us than they were 4 years ago. That process continues. But I do want to say I'm a contrarian on the issue of employed physicians, and just briefly, the whole idea of transparency on costs is going to drive the hospital-owned systems to lay off their doctors. If you get any CFO of a hospital system to talk about how their math works, they'll all admit that owning the doctor is a loss leader strategy. They lose money on the surgeon, and they lose money on the PCP that they buy in order to drive referrals to that surgeon. And then they make the money on the facility fees that they sort of capture from the surgeon or specialist. And what's happening with the price transparency, cost transparency drive now is they're going to have to look a little harder at those line items. And I think they're going to go back to the old style of attracting the facility fee from the surgeon based on ease of scheduling the case, the kind of techs and nursing support that they offer the surgeon in the OR, the supply chain of how they get things like implants to the doctor at the OR. They're going to start having to compete on those metrics again, rather than simply owning the doctor and requiring the cases scheduled in their OR. So I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a massive layoff, especially of the PCPs owned by hospitals. And I think that the doctors who know that or think about that or are aware of that are going to start preparing themselves for that move.
Where's that conversation happening? So back in the day,
right.
You might go to like Repertoire magazine or something, or one of these publications or associations. Maybe it's on Doximity. I don't know where Sermo. Where are people having this conversation?
Well, as you know, almost every doctor is a member of a private Facebook group, and typically it's a private group of doctors in their specialty. And so what we've done is found people who are in those groups. We pass that message to them, and then we let them have a peer-to-peer conversation in their groups. And as you can imagine, there's some pushback because the people who are currently employed, a lot of them don't want to face
the old way.
Well, a lot of them hate being employed and want to be independent, but don't think they can. And the
they
idea
think they cannot
that,
because what?
mostly money. Mostly it's managing a practice and trying to pay the bills on the lowering reimbursements.
Right.
You know, especially, and you got to know there's a bifurcation here. The surgeon or specialist typically views Medicare as the lowest reimbursing payer that they have,
Right.
and they're typically anti-Medicare. But for PCPs, Medicare patients are the most profitable patients they can have. Now, most of them don't understand that, but if you show a PCP how to meet the Medicare guidelines, do the things Medicare wants you to do, Medicare will reimburse a PCP about $2,500 a year. And the average PCP in the U.S. bills Medicare about $300 a year now. So you don't have to be really good with Excel or be a finance guy like I am by training to go back and say, hey, an extra $2,200 per Medicare patient times the number of Medicare patients you have is this really big number that boggles the mind. And the reality, and again, I'm sure there'll be people hang up from this call and say this guy's insane, but PCPs could theoretically be the highest paid specialty in healthcare if they managed to only fulfill the mandates from Medicare, the guidelines from Medicare. In other words, we're not talking about anything abusive to the system. No like tests just to test someone type of garbage that we see out there. This is all just focusing on what Medicare wants them to do for the patient.
I'm fascinated. I mean, of course, this is the medical devices group. I typically have conversations about that. This is a bit of field, but I'm completely unaware of what you just said. And you've ever heard Nick Anderson speak? He's my go-to for health economics. I don't ever remember him saying, I've never probed, but I don't ever remember him saying how Medicare is a gold mine for the smart.
It's not commonly known, and it's one of the reasons we have the success that we have is we can go in and document all of this for the PCP. And honestly, the biggest pushback or slowdown to the process is it's not something they're hearing from other people. And it takes, doctors typically are very analytical thinkers and analytical buyers. They typically have to go back in and dig into all of it for themselves and think it all through. But once they realize that what we're laying out there is absolutely, I mean, we can point you to press releases from SEMA Verma, for example, that absolutely document that this is what Medicare wants you to do. And it's because it saves Medicare money in the long run. Medicare understands.
You cited a source that I don't recognize, SEMA?
SEMA Verma. She used to be the director of Center for Medicare Services.
Oh, okay. That's a person.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah. So she actually talked about the adoption of some of these things like RPM and chronic care management and other services that the PCP can offer, bill for, and that reduces the need for hospitalizations.
In exchange for your time today, I want you to know that Medicare is a gold mine for the smart is something you can use. I don't.
Oh, I've already stolen that. I mean, believe me, that's in my notes.
Yeah,
I will ethically credit you with the idea, though.
You don't have to. It's my gift. I brought these guests on because they make things, and I know, and certainly in the case for Ed, and perhaps in the case for Elizabeth, that they would like physicians to be aware of what they have to say. So, Eddie, if you would go first. He's also in urology, and how might you interact with somebody like Eddie? Now, he's the Irish guy who told the joke before, so.
Yeah.
Yes,
Last name Capabianca. You can easily understand that I'm Irish.
County Cork, man, all the way.
Well, it was O Capabianca. We couldn't get work.
There you go.
We had to drop the O when we went to America.
Of course.
I had somebody believe that once. Anyway.
Actually, I do believe my last name is different through Ellis Island.
Yeah, this name made it through Ellis Island, if you can believe that. It's on the wall. Anyway, so
before you do, just a little bit of ethnicity.
Yeah,
I'm 100% Syrian. My last name is Hage, and it may be that my ancestors were Hajj, which is a pilgrimage to Mecca.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The trivia for you.
One of the five pillars, right?
O Capabianca, please continue.
Okay, so we've developed and are developing a suite of urology products for urinary control issues, specifically, anatomically for men and for women, incontinence and retention. We are based in the UK, so our first thing is we're sort of slowly going through the whole NHS approach. I know things are very different in the US, so it'd be interesting to know how that would work. And I know reimbursement is going to be an issue and a challenge. So here's what the device looks like. It's much smaller than most catheters. It's designed to stay inside the body, and that will reduce the incidence of infection from catheters.
Okay.
But most importantly, there's a little valve right there that the patient then is able to open, activate with an external magnet, and then it closes. I don't know, you see the little ball move?
Yeah. You're right.
So it's interesting because when I spoke to Brent about this some time ago, it was very interesting. His whole approach was, what's my carrying cost as a urologist going to be for this device? How many am I going to, and that's not this mindset in the UK or in Europe, at all, because they don't think, and so I'm interested to hear more about sort of how that mindset works, because in a sense, we have to sell, as I understand, we have to sell the idea to the urologist, and then the urologist basically is going to have to sell it to their patients.
Right. Let me back up quickly and just say that I got into healthcare because I worked on a direct-to-consumer campaign for a big pharma company. I was a strategist in advertising, and they hired us to work on the strategy for this campaign to advertise their drug. And I don't know if you see these ads in the UK, but they're basically 10 seconds about the drug and 50 seconds daring you to take it, right? So here's this drug, and here's this tremendous list of negative side effects that you can have. Mm-hmm. And our job was to help them do that. But
making jobs for speed talkers around the world.
Exactly. They actually record that stuff in normal speed and then just speed up the sound. Yeah, that's a real skill to be able to speak that quickly, and of course, no one from Texas could ever fulfill that role. But they just record it at normal speed and speed it up. But what I would say is every device company should have a DTC strategy. And what happens in devices is you look at it and say, gosh, we don't have $50 million ad buy budget to compete with the Novartises and Pfizers and so forth to run ads on TV. But what we're talking about is the DTC strategy around helping the doctor educate the patient, and that would work. How I would help someone like you is give the urologist the material, which obviously you'd have to help me create, that would educate the patient about this opportunity or solution and how it would benefit the patient. What I would then do is have the urologist share that content with a personalized bumper on it with the PCP colleagues in the area who would refer patients. Because the PCPs all know patients who have issues, and a lot of times because they don't think there's much that can be done for the patient, they don't refer to the urologist. And so what happens in urology in the US, and I can't speak to the UK, of course, but in the US, urology is kind of this two-tier practice for the urologist. There's a ton of persistent UTI patients who are office visits. They're a time suck. The reimbursement is pathetic, especially when it's Medicare. And that's typically who they're having to see a lot of. And then there's the OR work, the things that they can do a procedure, and that's where their money is made. Pardon me. So what urologists are all trying to do is figure out ways to drive the procedure side of the business and minimize the office visit side. And what we wind up doing is kind of functioning like a simultaneous translator at the UN, the guys wearing the headsets, and that's kind of our function because the PCP wants office visits. That's how they get paid. That's their world is the office visit. So educating the PCP about a procedure and creating that drive for the referral actually helps both parties, because now the PCP is having these office visits to talk about incontinence, but then creating surgeries for the urologist.
Okay. I think there's probably a longer conversation for us to have about all this, because you see, one of the other factors about the way we're looking at our market is that an awful lot of our patients aren't, straightforward urology.
Right.
The need for the catheter, particularly those who are chronic,
Right.
arise from the fact that they actually are MS patients or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or, spinal cord injury. So they have, a primary thing,
Right.
and then this is a real pain in the opposite of your ass, basically,
Right. Right.
Um,
But again, your urologist, that to me, that would be the urologist understanding where those problems lie. And as you can understand, a patient with MS, the neurologist treating that patient is focused on the MS, but there's a fairly straightforward way to craft a message around quality of life by resolving this one thing that, other than
exactly.
Other than ED, incontinence has to be one of the worst chronic conditions to have in terms of your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right. Having to wear diapers and all that.
Incontinence is huge, but the other thing, particularly in the male segment, is retention, where you get that from enlarged prostate, not just prostate cancers and so on. And retention, actually not talked about as much, can actually be even more life-threatening. So I think we've got a compelling story. The other side of our story is, of course, if on average those who are chronic users of catheters are getting something like 2.7 counties per year, and so educating the whole market, particularly including the insurance carriers, about how much cost there is for treating these people who are getting these infections is part of the compelling economic story.
Right.
And last but not least, it's not the urologist who gets bothered with this, but when somebody's got an indwelling catheter for a long period of time and they got a problem, that problem happens at any time of the day. And it's the nurse call out that happens in this country. Whether the people, and this is something I don't know, is whether people go to the ER every time they've got one of, a blockage of an existing catheter. And if we can reduce that, we're reducing a burden, we're reducing the cost of the ER visit, and so on.
Right. Avoided ER visits is a big driver in the value-based care kind of approach. So I would say, you've got a fantastic story, but it's got to start with someone championing that story because they want those procedures. They want to be the guy doing those implants. Yeah. Or those.
I've been rabbiting on. Like I say, I think it'd be great to have an offline chat with you. I want to pass it on to Elizabeth, and so you can.
Hey, it's my job to talk to people like you. So I welcome any contact. So happy to
remember
happy to
that's something I get 10% of any kind of.
Yeah. Of course.
Working that
10.
out.
I thought it was 15 was
the other thing was free. This one, Elizabeth, how, if at all, would you be able to use someone like Grady services?
Well, actually, there's all kinds of things are flying through my mind. So first of all, I
try to keep them relevant to this conversation, though.
Okay, I will. So reimbursement and using physicians in their practices. First of all, I have two companies. So I want to say that first of all. So one is we're replacing a piece of tape with a tag to identify medications, all kinds of medications. The other is I have a stethoscope company, and we're improving the stethoscope in lots of different ways. And our first product is a flashlight to add to your stethoscope that a doctor could use that can be sanitized. So how can I get to the physicians with my Jan Gates on MDG little new stethoscope light that can be sanitized? That's just one thing. This is our flashlight. It's called the key light.
Okay.
Anyway, so reimbursement is important not for the flashlight necessarily, but for our patient safety device to identify high alert medications. And so we've engaged with Nick Anderson, thank you, Joe Hayes, to help us with CMS for reimbursement on that particular product.
Awesome.
And by the way, I spent time in Houston, Texas, so I know the dry cleaning and the shoe shine people. I probably didn't meet Lewis, but I was there a few years before you were in the Texas
Okay.
Medical Center. Yes.
Yep. The one of the things that jumps out at me about that is that in the systems, there are always doctors who are forward thinkers. They may be employed by a system, but they think like an entrepreneur. And what you'll find is that if you can get one of them to champion your cause, not to CMS, but to their internal system,
Yes.
you now have it's like the old thing about how hard it is to turn an aircraft carrier, but once they turn, they don't stop turning. I mean, it's hard to stop them. And you'd be amazed what a thought leader, respected colleague within a system, pushing the system to supply or support a technology, and then the system will drive the reimbursement conversation. And they're negotiating from a place that a lot of my independent doctors can't even dream of, because, you know, an independent doctor who sees 30 patients a day doesn't have a lot of leverage with the payers the way a system does.
Correct. So is that something that your firm, is that a different angle that your firm would support?
Sure, we'd help you find that champion. I can think of one right now that would be ideal for you, who's a medical director of a big EHR as well. And that EHR firm has they've kind of created a mission for themselves to bring these sorts of ideas to doctors. And we partner with them for some of the services we provide, like credentialing and cybersecurity for the office computers and things like that are all sort of a reseller function for us.
Right.
But we partner with the firms that would then educate their doctor base about it. Right now, those partnerships give us access. Doesn't mean we work with all of them, of course, but we have access to about 200,000 of the 800,000 practicing physicians in the U.S. just through those relationships, where they would go out and say, "Hey, doc, you need to know about this."
Right. So, okay. So then, in fact, something like our patients are reducing medication errors. So it's patient safety. It's we've actually created a language. We have done a pilot study. Excuse me.
It's an adherence argument as well, Elizabeth, and that's one of the things we get content from pharma for the doctor to be able to share with the patient. Like, I'm writing you this prescription, and let me just take a quick detour, but I'll loop this back to the thought. What happens in a lot of cases is, you know, the patient is there asking some questions, wanting some information, and it feels like they're challenging the doctor. It feels like, "Hey, doc, I know you went to med school and residency and you've been practicing for 20 years, but I found this blogger on Google who says," right? And you can imagine how maddening that has to be for a doctor.
Right.
But what it really is think about your auto mechanic who says, "Hey, your car will be ready tomorrow. It'll cost $2,000. Well, that's not good enough. I want to know what went wrong. Was it something I did with the way I drive or the way I maintained my car? It's not that I'm challenging the mechanic's expertise. I'm not a mechanic. I don't have the tools. I'm not challenging him. I just want to buy into the process." And when you change your mindset and realize that what most patients are doing is they want to buy into the process. And that's when it becomes easy for a doctor to say, "Hey, I have created content in a course," or "This particular drug has given us some patient education material. Look at your email when you get home. You'll see an invitation." The patient logs back into our portal and watches the pharma approved and compliance approved educational material about the product.
Okay, well,
And
this has been great. I mean, this is
money.
amazing.
Right.
This is just exactly the juncture. And I see Jan Gates is on. So Jan is our packaging expert. Thank you, Joe Hage, for Jan Gates. There's a whole string, and I unfortunately have an 11 o'clock team meeting but Grady, I look forward to meeting with you offline. There's all kinds of things that are flowing through my mind right now that I would, like to share and learn more about what it is you do.
Be happy
Grady,
to help.
are you around May 10th through the 12th? I'd love it if you joined us in San Diego. In fact, Nick is going to give a talk for the 10X Medical Device Conference that I host. He's going to be doing 2.5 hours on reimbursement. I'd love to have you in that room and to contribute on from your angle.
Well, in order to get me to travel to San Diego, you'll of course have to twist my arm. I am almost 100% certain I don't have anything scheduled then, and I would love to come. So
Great, fantastic. Then you'll have a chance to meet Elizabeth and
Well, I hope to meet you before that, Grady, maybe in Austin or Dallas. So we're just up and down
Absolutely.
I-35. So,
absolutely, and I have access to Zoom. So
right. Well, I do too. Joe,
compromise
thank you so
access
much.
anyhow. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. We'll see you soon. And Jan, thanks not only for helping my friend with her packaging, but you left a comment here that may be relevant for the group and for Grady.
I just know that in one of the hospitals I used to go to, they have patient education Zoom meetings. And this kind of thing would be, well, at least for individual products, to talk to the patients through the doctors on life enhancement types of things that are going on. And I've just moved to a new area. I do not know if we have that around here, but it was really helpful where I used to live to go into these things. And there usually wasn't a lot of patients there, but it was quite interesting to hear from the doctor standpoint different things that would enhance things. Do you know if more hospitals are doing that, or was I in an unusual place?
I'm going to go with the latter at least.
Yeah, I'm going to say
Former at
I'm going
most.
to say that's an unusual thing. What we focus on is what we talk about the help desk reality. If you talk to someone who works on a help desk, they all have this little joke that they say the new users ask the old questions. And if you think about how many times a doctor doing a consult has to answer the same 8 or 10 questions over and over and over. Joe, 20 years ago, I need
to interrupt there and say that is exactly the point I make for clients. Last year, my big point was frequently asked questions is the most valuable content you can have on a website.
Yes, right. Except when I've been to a dentist and they'd say, oh, and sit you down and watch a video, which is really, really frustrating.
Well, I'm saying in anticipation of, but sure. I mean, if you're sitting right across from the person, but I know a lot of the people on this call, and certainly in my life, I get asked the same questions. And I thank God I wrote a blog post and I invested like 6 or 7 hours on that post, but hardly anybody.
Yeah, I should do that. 40 years in packaging, and I'm having the same kinds of questions over and over and over again.
And the other thing, this is from years back, record yourself, post the answer, have them go watch it. I answered this exact question in detail.
If a guy like me can take a cell phone and a ring light and record those videos that I put on LinkedIn, anybody can.
They're fantastic.
Well, that makes it good. I was interested though, because you talked about doctors. I did have a brother-in-law who's passed away now, who joined a group because of the $300,000 medical insurance that he had to pay for current years and the 200 and some for past years to keep him in business. Though eventually he did go into a smaller group where they shared all that, and they actually built a little surgery center that they thought would take 3 years to pay back, and it took them a year. So do they need groups, or are you just working with independents one at a time? Or maybe it's better for them to do in 2 or 3 groups, 2 or 3 people in a group.
Right. Independent to me means the boss is a doctor. Doesn't necessarily mean that all the doctors are shareholders or that there's only one doctor. It just means that the practice is owned by doctors. And my view of it, and I think most doctors who are in this boat agree with me, if the ultimate decision maker is a fellow physician, things are just run differently than if the decision making is a suit. And what you're running into in the American system is a significant number of doctors ultimately report to a suit. And obviously, my objection to that is I don't, as a suit myself, not that I wear suits very often, but I would fall into the suit category, not the doctor category. I have no business making medical decisions. I have no business dictating to a doctor how to practice medicine. And unfortunately, in the systems, that happens a lot. Where in an independent practice, even if it's 100 doctors and 98 of them work for the 2 partners type of structure, they're still reporting to a fellow physician. and the decisions that get made are made differently in that scenario.
So how do we get rid of suits?
It's coming. I think that what's happening with the transparency mandates, the hospitals are going to have to compete on price. And just as an example, I can go down and get a knee replacement done in the Dallas area, and I can get, the same knee implant and top quality surgeon. I can go to one hospital and pay 20 grand a knee, or I can go down the street, and I mean literally down the street, and pay 60 grand per knee to have that same replacement done. All of that $40,000 is going to the hospital. And once those numbers are truly out there where other doctors can see them and direct their patients, pardon me, where employers who pay for self-funded plans can see those numbers and start to guide their employees to that lower cost facility, the hospitals are going to have to bring those prices down into a more competitive market. When that happens, they're going to look at these loss leader strategies and say, we got to cut all these PCPs. We can't afford to lose money on the PCPs and make it up on the facility fees, and they're going to cut the PCPs. And then that will eventually happen to some of the surgeons and specialists as well.
Surely there's somebody working on this concept where it's going to be like an Airbnb or an Expedia that lists, by quality and by cost and by geography where to get your knee done.
Yeah, Health Cost Labs is a great example.
Are they doing this already? This concept?
Yes. Yeah, they're pulling in.
I could go online right now and find the cheapest knee around me.
Not as a consumer. It's still a subscription service right now for example, for doctors to be able to see the data and payers and plan sponsors. But it's coming where you will eventually be able to see. I've been told, perfect example in my mind. If you're told to go get an MRI, you can go to Green Imaging, and they will give you a local imaging center to go to, and their radiologist will do the read, and your MRI with and without contrast is going to cost $300 to $400, depending on what part of the country you're in and so forth. That same MRI at the local hospital can cost $3 to $4 grand. Believe me, the hospitals have nowhere to go and nowhere to hide. The abuse of the system is going to squeeze them, and they are going to have to deal with these loss leader strategies. Look, loss leader makes a lot of sense in a lot of businesses. Think about grocery stores don't mark up the price of milk. Why? They absolutely sell milk at cost and lose money selling it because they know that the people who buy milk have kids, and those are typically the
cereal.
Largest. And you're going to buy your meat there, and you're going to buy your bread there, and all the other things that they do have markups on. And because the price of milk's an easy one to keep track of, and that drives that purchasing behavior. Well, in the hospital world, it's you buy the PCP who can only refer to surgeons that you own. The surgeons, when they need us to do a surgery, can only bring them to your OR. And that's been the strategy. Yeah, we'll lose $100 grand a year by employing a PCP, and we'll lose $100 grand a year employing the surgeon, but we'll make an extra $1 million a year in facility fees. And once that becomes a competitive market, I think what'll happen is they'll have to go back to competing on, how easy it is to schedule a case in our hospital, how supportive the people are, how well the supply chain functions, and so forth, in order to get the surgeon to schedule the case with them.
Thank you for joining us, Jan. Grady, I really enjoyed this time with you. We talked a little bit when we were both working on Brent's project, but I really feel as though I have come to know and appreciate you much more today. And in addition to knowledge, I get a lot of warmth from you, which I appreciate. And I think your approachability cannot hurt business. I would say that other folks emulate this man because what we're doing here, just talking, this is marketing today. I'm really glad to be able to join us in May. I'll follow up with you. Jump onto Slack today, and we'll keep talking.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to fix this issue that I had with getting the announcements out next week. Brady, I hope you can join us next week. I have Dr. Philip Lowe, he was my keynote speaker back in 2015, and he's the inventor of the iBrain. So as for anyone who's interested in being telepathic, I think you should tune in. Seriously, the stuff, it's going to go way over my head, but I'll see if I can ask questions dumb enough to.
My mother was
level.
telepathic. She
Sorry?
had an uncanny ability to know when I was doing something I shouldn't be doing, and I
This is
had
your
to have
mother?
been. Yeah.
She wasn't so
Uncanny ability
telepathic
to-
that she understood that clam dip was not something that you wanted.
I didn't say she was empathetic. I said she was telepathic.
Very funny. Grady, thank you so much. And I'm
I've
so
enjoyed it.
profoundly
Appreciate
sorry
you
for
having
your
me.
loss. And wow, you have your own children, yeah?
Yes.
How many and ages?
Just one, a daughter. She'll be 24.
So you're going back into the young child parenting business again.
Soon, yeah.
You
I
have
am
other
grateful
siblings.
she got her looks from her mother, though. I have to mention that.
You're not a bad looking guy. I mean, I suppose with hair, but you have other brothers. Are they
Yeah,
going to be
two.
pitching in as co-fathers, or is it really you?
The middle brother and I we're both very close with the younger brother, and we're both close with his wife and kids. So I think we're going to kind of split things up.
And the other brother, is he a deadbeat or?
Um,
I'm not going to keep this
Well,
part on the recording, by the way.
he is. There's a 7-letter word that starts with ass and ends with hole that I probably should mention on a Zoom call. But my oldest brother and I have no relationship, and he graduated high school as we were moving to El Salvador. So he never really knew my little brother, didn't live with him as a kid, and just kind of has just been not a
I have
factor.
two stories
in his
related to that term that you chose not to use. One, it was on Stephen Colbert last week. Tig Notaro was noting how, do you watch Stephen Colbert?
Yeah.
Did you see this
Hilarious,
interview?
yeah. I didn't.
She said on CBS, you can say the word ass, they won't bleep you. You can say the word hole, they won't bleep you. But if you say bleep, see what I mean?
They bleep you. Yep.
And the other one was my son Lucas. I made a cartoon out of it. I have a cartoon strip called The Real Hages of Washington, where I take frames of the four of us and have real conversations that I bring to life. And I don't remember the setup exactly, and time forbids me to find it exactly, but it was something like my 7-year-old, Zachary said, Lucas, give me the remote. And Lucas is like, Zachary, you're being an ass. And Beth said, Lucas. And he said, what? I didn't say hole.
Exactly. I love it.
Good times. All right.
I
God
love
bless,
it.
Mr. Gibbs. Thank you so much for your time today. Thanks,
I
everyone.
appreciate
And I'll
having
see
me
you
on.
next week. Bye for now.
All right. Thank you. Take care.